Hello and welcome to the Deep 3 podcast. This is your host, Matt, joined as always by Sam, Kevin, and John. How's it going, boys?
It's going.
I'm literally the GOAT right now, all right? TB12, that's all I gotta say. TB12.
As much as I dislike Tom Brady, I dislike the Packers more, so congratulations. I didn't see this play. I just want to touch on it really quickly. Kevin, what happened at the last part of that? They kicked a field goal instead of going for it?
Yeah, the Packers it was fourth down, but they were on shorter than the 5-yard line, and there was 2 minutes left in the game, and they were like, okay, we're down by 8 points. We're going to kick the field goal and give the ball back to the Bucs. And then they gave it back to the Bucs, and the Bucs just ran out the clock, and then they won.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Speaking of really dumb things, why don't we get into these NBA updates? First thing first, Miami Heat is bringing in COVID sniffing dogs. Can somebody please validate this for me? Is this a real thing?
Yeah, definitely real. Isn't it ironic because, you get these sniffing dogs at the airport, but it's also at the American Airlines Center, so it's like another airport at that point. But I just find it very funny because the VP of business strategy for Miami Heat was like, oh, we've been using sniffing dogs since in the airport for sniffing bombs. But I'm like, but bro, this is a virus? How do you detect it? How does this even work?
Yeah, I mean, if dogs could sniff COVID, then why aren't we using them more often? But this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I can't believe this is. But
right.
Then again, when you're in Miami, when you're in Florida, do as the Floridians do.
No.
Next thing is up. The Cavs send Kevin Porter Jr. to the Rockets for a protected second rounder. I am one of the first people, I think, in our basketball group chat that was just like, who the fuck is this guy? So, Sam, do you want to break this down for me? Help me out here.
He was the last pick in the 2019 draft. They drafted Kevin Porter from USC. People say he's very talented. I mean, we've barely seen him play. He's had a lot of issues on and off the court. And I think it stemmed from an incident. He had an unregistered firearm in his gun or in his car back in November, so he just hasn't played. And the day he decided to come back is when they realized they put his locker by the trash can, basically, at that point, because they got Torian Prince, Jared Allen. So they're like, all right, these guys are playing, so let's bring these homies in. So he was definitely not pleased, and he called the GM Kobe Altman modern day slavery at this point.
What the fuck?
It's really funny because he's also black, so I don't really know how this works at that point, but it's a different story. But luckily, I think both parties were able to trade him. I mean, I think the Cavs messed up because they traded him for literally nothing. It's a protected second rounder. That's top 55 protected, which the Cavs are not going to be at that point. So went to the Rockets. So I'm rooting for the guy. I think a lot of potential, it's just untapped at this point. I'm not sure if the right bunch is DeMarcus Cousins and John Wall, but hey, yeah, I'm rooting for the guy.
Yeah, this is very confusing and just the most random thing I feel like that kind of came out of this whole trade scenario that's been going on. But next thing, the TNT crew, they have some very unnecessary beef, or is it necessary? John, do you want to help me out with that?
Look, far be it from me to criticize my beloved family at TNT, Ernie and Chuck and Shaq and Kenny. They're like family to me. But like family, they make some silly little choices every now and then. Specifically Shaq, who continues to decide to say ridiculous shit to NBA players. I don't know if y'all saw the clip of him saying to Donovan Mitchell's face over Zoom, yeah, Donovan, I basically don't think that you could ever be much more than pretty good. And then Donovan Mitchell was like, well, okay. He's like, I don't. He's like, Shaq, I don't fucking care what you say. These guys are just reckless. And especially when it's Chuck. I know we saw the quote of KD being like, why do people keep asking this idiot his opinions? It's kind of true. They're not being very good about what they should be doing, which is like hyping up the product that they're selling, like, which is NBA basketball. But it sure gets a lot of clicks watching them be like ridiculous and goofy and like say this bonkers shit. And that's what Charles Barkley is there for, is to just be a clown. Like he's like no one goes to Chuck to like talk X's and O's. Like you're going to Chuck to hear him say something like the Portland Trail Blazers are going to the finals. Like he's so yeah, it's all fun to me, but it's also like, come on, like a little more respect would be nice.
It's just like I think it's the most ridiculous thing. Like you said, John, you're supposed to be hyping up the players, hyping up the product and whatnot, and then you're just like kind of shitting on them. It's a little unnecessary, I guess. But go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I just like to add that like it was just funny because when we had Shaq like disparage like James Harden being like a quitter, like did not do anything for Houston. James Harden did like tweet out that like, oh, we should be like supporting like young black men in society. And I found it even more hypocritical because he didn't do that for his own coach in Houston, who is a and so I'm like, bro, like what are we talking about at this point? It's like I think it's here and there. I mean, I think TNT has definitely evolved to just more of let's just bash people because we're old heads and we can do whatever we want because I got rings. That's kind of the argument. I got rings and you don't, so I can say whatever I want. So hopefully they can balance it out.
Some of them have rings. Chuck is not one of them, so maybe he should keep his mouth shut every now and then.
The championship Chuck.
All right.
All right. Speaking of KD, why don't we get into this very unfortunate topic about the Nets? This is a very confusing time for all of us. I feel like a majority of us was expecting unbelievable things from James Harden, KD, and Kyrie, and yet we haven't really seen that. Kevin, I'm going to start with you on this one. They lost to the Cavs. What the fuck is going on?
Dude, I think we're seeing I think we pointed out multiple times. They have no paint presence whatsoever. They got absolutely bullied by the Cavs team. I mean, like, what was it? DeAndre Jordan, I think, had like 4 rebounds or something like that, or maybe like 7 or something, compared to the Cavs, who like they had multiple people in double digits for rebounds. The Cavs outscoring them in the paint like by a huge margin. Like this Nets team is great outside of the perimeter, but there is literally no paint presence, and it's embarrassing. And all a team needs to do is have even a remotely big man on their team, and they can just go to town against this pathetic like front court of this Nets team. I don't know. It's embarrassing, honestly. That's the best word I can use to describe it. And I think we all pointed that out before, but I don't think we were expecting it to this level,
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like, just to give you guys a little bit of insight, so I typically have been doing a lot of like sportsbook gambling for basketball and whatnot. And in all the research that I've done around it, it's actually the safest bet is almost always, it's about like, I think 60 to 70% of the time, you want to bet on people who A, have the most rebounds consistently, and B, score the most in the paint. And the reason for that being is because when you have players like Trae Young, like KD, I mean, KD is like an amazing scorer, but like, let's just say like James Harden, for example, they could either be extremely hot or they could be extremely cold. And when a team's main source of like scoring output is your 3-pointers and whatnot and your deep shots, that could either go very, very well or very, very poorly. So that's why typically when you're betting and whatnot, the safest bet is to go with people who score really well inside the paint. And that's why. And I don't think we all like realized that it would be to this point that like, yeah, James Harden's scoring a lot, KD scoring a lot, but nothing is happening in the paint. They aren't getting rebounds. They aren't getting those close shots. And yeah, you can score a ton of baskets and stuff like that. But when you're not playing defense, I think we're starting to realize that's not going to do much for you. But going off of this, Sam, Do you think this is more of a talk of like the Nets are really screwing up, or the Cavs are like actually pretty solid?
Man, that's tough. I think the major thing that was I would call a screw up was the getting rid of going on Kevin's point, just getting rid of that defensive presence in the paint. We know Jared Allen was actually a very solid piece, and I know that they would not be able to do the trade unless they had to give up Jared Allen because I heard that they wanted to get rid of like Landry Shamet, but who wants Landry Shamet when he goes 0 for 6? So, but like I think Kevin nailed it for the most part. This team does not have another center actually on roster because the next tallest person is Kevin Durant or Jeff Green, and we know who Jeff Green is, right? He's homeless basically. I don't know how he's on the roster. He somehow starts in some cases over Joe Harris, which is ridiculous. I don't know. It doesn't even make any sense at that point, but it might be just like growing pains. Maybe just you built 3 superstars together, 2 superstars and an all-star. Kyrie, no offense, but not there yet. But Cavs definitely are proving us wrong so far, and I'm genuinely impressed, and I will probably never say that again. So it kind of goes both ways, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. But going into last week's game of the week, it was the Nets against Miami. John, our boy, the man, the myth, the legend, Bam, he goes the fuck off. Why don't we talk a little bit about that? How was I think last week we even mentioned that Bam was the one that kind of needed to be the all-star in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because Jimmy still is MIA, so they really needed Bam. It's exactly like we've been saying. It's just like, of course, Bam would have his best game of the year against a team that has like no one that can stop him. So it was a perfect situation for Bam to have a great game. And then obviously, like in that game, Katie's great. One thing that I think we're seeing a lot of with the Nets that I think is particularly interesting about them right now is how weird it's been since Kyrie got there, specifically with James Harden, because now we're seeing a lot of like, I don't know, like low scoring kind of triple double outputs from James Harden, while Kyrie's like taking like 30 shots. Like, and Kyrie's like, he's a great scorer. It's not that he's like wasting all of those possessions. He is a good scorer and he's like fairly efficient and all that stuff. But it's just like, it feels like it's really taking away from James Harden, which is kind of I don't know, kind of the worst case scenario. I don't think you want James Harden to be going out there and like putting up like Ben Simmons stat lines every night. Like you want James Harden there to be like scoring and distributing the ball, yeah, but like I don't know, it looks a lot weirder than I thought it would. And I actually like last week I was very against the idea of trading Kyrie because I wanted to see what it looks like. And now that we have, I think they maybe have to trade Kyrie, or maybe they have to trade someone like Joe Harris to get a good center in return. It's not like they need all of that offense. Like they have plenty of floor spacing in their big 3 alone, but it's weird. I didn't think it was going to be this bad. I really didn't. I thought it was going to be bad. I thought they were going to always be really high scoring games. I just didn't think it would be like so embarrassingly like there was a possession I think where Andre Drummond, there were like 5 nets around him, and Andre Drummond went and got an offensive rebound and like dunked it right through all of them, like because no one moved to the ball, no one boxed out. It was just like they're just not. They definitely don't look like finals contenders right now. I think we can all agree on that. I think that they need to make some moves like urgently.
Yeah, and I don't think this is the last that we'll be hearing from the Nets about trade offers and stuff like that. I don't think they're done. I honestly didn't think that they were done when they got James Harden because I just don't think that was the final piece. It was a very important piece to have, but that just can't be the final thing. Even though that was honestly a very surprisingly close game. It was 128 to 124. Nets won. High scoring game as hell, very high scoring. But Sam, KD, he had a hell of a game.
Yeah, I mean, KD's been KD. I think that's the one thing we've seen is that like he actually has looked like the old KD, and I think even maybe better because like I mean,
Yeah.
this is the first time where he is actually the. I mean, personally, I think Steph Curry was the best player still on that team, even though he took a step back. I think he was still like the glue piece, even though like Draymond was more of the vocal.
Mhm.
But I mean, KD's just back at it again. This is like the reliable KD that you need in clutch time, and I think we're all just like blown away by how much, how well this guy's playing from the knock on wood, the like injury he had. Like this guy,
Yeah.
no one does this. No one does this. I can tell you that. No one does this.
No, nobody does this at all, man. KD has been on fire. But Kevin, we all know KD's greatness. His scoring ability is almost unmatched. I would argue even unmatched. But why don't we talk about James Harden and Kyrie Irving? Do you think that this dynamic is actually working? I have a feeling I know your answer.
I think John hit it spot on exactly how I feel. I think the roles are reversed of what they should be. I think you have James Harden kind of being the classic point guard who's dishing it out everywhere, but not taking as many shots as he used to on like the Rockets, whereas Kyrie's taking like 30 shots a game now. And like again, like John said, they're not all wasted, but I think a lot of the time some of those like pull up twos that Kyrie's making, I would have rather, if I was the coach, I would rather it be James Harden making or trying to shoot an open three than Kyrie making this step back jumper from like 18 feet. So I don't know. I don't think it's working at the moment. I think they kind of need to get their groove down of what their rules are. And right now it's really muddled on like who's the point guard, who's the shooting guard, like if it's kind of a back and forth thing or what. I don't know. It seems confusing at the moment.
It is a little bit confusing, and it's definitely concerning for the Nets in general. John, did you have something to say?
I guess I don't. I don't have. I'm just like really. I'm just very baffled. I don't know. I think that like we just need to give the. I'm on the fence. I think we need to give them more time to figure it out. But I also think that like they're dropping 2 in a row to the Cavs, who are pretty good this year. Like they're not bad. They're a great defense. It's just like I like their best defender is Kevin Durant. Like, you know, and that's like no knock. Kevin Durant's a good defender. Like he really figured out defense when he was at Golden State and he's like been good at it, but it's just like they have a lineup of like basically all defensive nothings. Like it's just they're just not there, and I don't think it's just that they need to figure out how to play together, Matt. I think it's like you said. I think that they just need to make another move, and I think we will see it. I don't know. I don't know like if there's a great way to make that move. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely I'm on the same page with you. But this has brought up a very, very good question. Really quickly, just around the podcast, I wanna throw this out to you guys. Panic or poise? Do you think the Nets should be panicking, or do you think that they're poised, that they're fine? Sam, I'll go with you first.
Yeah, that's tough. I think you got to panic because I think I'm just saying when you have 2 superstars and all-star talent, you should just be winning games. Like there's no excuse at that point. It's different than the big 3 in Miami because you had 2 proven and then someone that was still growing in terms of like a Chris Bosh, in my opinion. And I think basketball's changed a lot at this point, so everyone should just be able to play any type of basketball. And I think Kyrie's a big issue here, and that's not just his mentality, but I just think his mentality in terms of can he just play off ball and not take 27 shots a game? Because it's not going to work that way. You need James Harden to be producing because his scoring ability is also consistent, and his way that he can move the ball fluidly it's unreal. I mean, we've seen the man did lead the league 2 years ago in assists, and we bashed him so many times for not being, a team player. But we're seeing he's trying his best here. I think everyone is trying their best.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's only been like 2 games with Kyrie, but it should be of concern because Kyrie's the one that's not changing so far.
Yeah, so you're panicking?
Yeah.
All right, John, are you panicking or are you poised?
I'm panicking. Kyrie's not panicking. He just posted like that I think he had like an Instagram story that was like, hey guys, like everything's gonna be fine. You know, people are haters, like all that shit. And it was like, give us time. It's like, yeah, Totally, but also we saw the games. Like there's a lot of work to be done. I'm definitely like panicking if I'm them. Maybe I'm wrong. We're very reactionary people, but I definitely like. It looks bad. It doesn't look not bad. It looks like you should be nervous.
Kevin, are you panicking?
I am panicking, especially because in this NBA currently, we have a lot of strong, good offensive big men, and that's everyone in the NBA now knows that that's the weakness of the Nets is if you can put a big man who can score under the basket, you win. So a lot of teams are just going to like try and feed it through that whoever their center is. Like 76ers are going to go to town every time they face the Nets. And teams like that are just going to have their way with them. So until they fix that problem, I am definitely panicking. I think they have a great offensive team, but that weakness is so obvious to literally everyone. I think every team is going to try and take advantage of it.
Fair enough. And you know what, Kevin? I'm really glad that you mentioned the Sixers. We will be going into the Grizzlies in a minute, but first I want to talk about the 76ers, a team that, you know what, they seem to have broken the mold a little bit on their yearly hype train and then just falling straight down to earth. But then the number one seed in the East, despite having, a destroyed roster for weeks and weeks and weeks, but they're making it work. They are doing very, very well. And the man on the top of that roster is Mr. Joel Embiid, MVP for front runner. He's killing it, man. He's killing it. Sam, do you think that Joel, just quickly talking about Joel Embiid right now, do you think it's very fair to put him into this conversation? And would you put him as the MVP?
Yeah, no, I think it's almost like obvious at this point. I feel like it'd be very hard to disagree with this, just because he is really just the only person that can carry this team. If you take him out, I don't think the Sixers team would be good at all. No offense to Ben Simmons, but he just doesn't have that scoring ability at that point. But Doc Rivers is doing something magical with this duo and this team overall. But Joel Embiid's finally living up to what we want him to be and just be a pure dominant big offensively and defensively. So I think this guy could be on pace to be Defensive Player of the Year as well. So that'd be fun to see.
John, I know we like to shit on Paul George a lot, but it turns out that for whatever reason, he is in the MVP conversation. Are we standing this? Are we on board with this, or do we just think it's a giant joke?
Y'all, and I put this here because I knew it would bother Kevin, but I think that the Clippers are actually, as we're speaking, the one seed in the West, tied with the Lakers, but like just above, I think, from a tiebreaker. I think that's probably more because of Kawhi Leonard than it is Paul George. But the thing is that Paul George is having a legitimate bounce back year. Unfortunately, every time we record this podcast, Paul George always is coming off the worst game of the week that he plays. This week, he had 11 points against the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm guessing he spent a lot of time getting guarded by Lou Dort. So we get it. Lou Dort's a machine. The man is a defensive force. We get it, Paul George, but not really. Paul George has been very good. And I think that by the end of the year, he'll probably be a top 10 MVP candidate if he keeps playing like he's been playing, because he has actually been really, really good. And that's reflected in the record for the Clippers. But if we're talking like legitimate contender, no way. Like I don't know. Let me think about who I would put as my person there, but like it's not Paul George.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Kevin, we're just gonna assume that Paul George is not even close to your MVP candidate. So we're just gonna throw that out there. Where would you put Joel Embiid in your MVP talk?
For me, I think I put him at number one right now.
Really?
Until I see other people kind of step up. He's definitely been very impressive on kind of like both ends of the court. Like he's been like outshining everyone else at what he does in every aspect, like he's getting all those rebounds. He's getting blocks regularly. He's scoring obscene numbers every night. Like he's averaging almost 30 points a game at this point. Like he's putting in the work. and I think it's finally paying off. And as long as, knock on wood, he stays healthy, I don't know if there's anyone that can take this from him currently at the moment.
I really do hope that he gets MVP just because, like, if Joel, okay, my only beef is if Joel Embiid cannot be healthy, like if he cannot stay healthy, I think he loses it because that is like the biggest question mark that we have been seeing from him. And the biggest problem that's been a part of his career in the playoffs specifically is health. We saw the one playoff run, I think it was a couple of years ago, where like he was like having really bad stomach pains and whatnot, and he could not like play a full game. He couldn't. And it was just like, it was absolutely insane. So unless Joel Embiid can't stay healthy, I'd probably put him at number 5 for MVP talks. But if he's healthy, man, if he's healthy, he's 1 or 2. Like he's playing out of his mind this year, man.
Yeah, I mean, also to add, he has a baby, so you know what happens when you have a baby.
You're right.
You win things.
You level up. You level up. I think, yeah, I think Joel Embiid, it has to be the MVP frontrunner, just given the situation of like who else is on his team. They're the best team in the East. He's the best player on that team. Where like with the Lakers, you have both LeBron and AD. And that's why, like that's what makes them work. The Clippers have Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Like Ben Simmons is great, but he's not like on the level of any of those guys. With what we're seeing from Joel right now, I have to give him the number 1 spot at like this point in the season. He's just been incredible. Though there are already like some slight knee issues and stuff. I wish that I could say it was Jokic. I wish that I could say it was Luka. Yeah. But they're just not winning enough yet. They are having incredible games where they're like carrying a roster of like just scrubs on their back because for some reason their rosters are just not performing this year. I love those guys, but they aren't there yet because their teams aren't there, and it's kind of most of the time a team award as much as it is an individual one, except for the Russ season. I got to give it to Joel for now, but like I hope that Luka can get in there. And I want to look smart. I want to be like I called it. Like he's been great. We all love our Luka. I love the man. He's been great. He just needs his team to step up.
Yeah, honestly though, and I think they've been winning. They've been doing a lot better when KP's playing. Who would have thought? Why don't we get into injuries? And with that, I'll start with the Grizzlies. The biggest thing about the Grizzlies right now is that their next 3 games, I believe, have been postponed. It's a big problem, and it's mainly because of COVID, obviously. Do you think it's time that the NBA kind of slows down with all of these postponements, Sam?
I've been on the fence about it. I think it's there is like obvious concern because we've been postponing a lot of games everywhere. It's not just the Grizzlies, but we saw the Philly games get postponed and stuff like that. And you can't really make up a lot of those games, most likely, just because they need to somehow catch up and get back on pace for the regular season for next year to come up. But there's also it's sad to say there's also just a lot of money on the line where like they need to have all the TV money and revenue coming in. So Adam Silver's got a big plate to deal with, and I think he's trying his best. I think we give him too much love, but I think he's trying his best to try to get both sides of the plate at that point. But I would actually be okay with some of a week or 2 just of like, hey, let's chill out, everyone get back at it, and then let's just revise and actually get a real plan going.
Yeah, I would absolutely have to agree with that. That's a really big concern that we've been seeing because it seems like almost every single week. Actually, I'm pretty sure every single week there's at least 1 game that's been postponed. So hopefully, the NBA can figure something out with that. Next big injury is CJ McCollum, our boy. Very unfortunate. He's out for 4 weeks with a stress fracture in his left foot. I think it was who was it? Chuck that said Portland could make it to the finals. John,
Chuck.
How is that looking? How's that looking for him?
It looks bad. It looked bad even before this injury. Portland's not a very good team. I don't know what Chuck was thinking. They're like, I love Dave and I love CJ, and you know how I feel about Nurkic, who is also out for a very long time. It's just like they're just not a very good team. Their defense is abysmal. They're starting Enes Kanter now, I think, which is never good. But the CJ injury specifically it's a bummer because he was having an incredible year. He was shooting like 11 3-pointers a game at above 40%, I think, which is insane. That's like Steph Curry level, like shooting. It's insane. And it really sucks because he was just on one this year, man. And now, like, even when he comes back, there might be time to like adjust because it's just like foot injuries are always pretty scary for NBA players. At least he's not like a big guy. But it's a bummer. I think Portland, as we're talking, is still the 4 seed technically. I don't think that they're going to be there for very much longer. I think we're about to see that take a pretty dramatic dip because the team is just not healthy and it's like not very good. And now that CJ's gone, it's like it's all on Dame. And like I hate to say it, I just don't think that's enough. I love the shoes, by the way. We love the new Dame sneakers. Poking fun at that Russell Westbrook OKC Thunder game-winning shot that Dame had. We love that, but we don't love anything else for Portland right now. It's looking bad.
Those shoes are fire, man. I think they're cut. I think they're clean. I think they're cut. I think they're wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be getting into the game of the week. Kevin, we have the Lakers against Philly. We have 2 top-tier teams going against each other right now. What do you think is first off, I wanted to hear who you have winning this game. And then who do you think is the, let's just say, MVP of the game?
I think this is going to be a really tough game. I think it's going to be really low scoring, defensive heavy. I gotta go with my Lakers on this, just to hype them up a little bit. But I think it's going to be a very maybe 2 or 3 basket game at the end. I think John was saying beforehand, 98-96 kind of area. I think it's really going to come down to AD versus Joel. I think that's going to be tough. Both really strong big men that are offensive crazy. AD's coming off that game against the Bulls where he was popping off finally after having kind of a rough couple games before that. And Embiid's just been playing out of his mind the past few weeks. So I really think one of them are going to be basically the MVP of the game because one of them is going to have to step up and carry their team, basically. I don't know. I got to go with Lakers and AD just out of loyalty.
Yeah, hey, that's totally fair. I get it. Yeah, loyalty. Sam, why don't I go to you? You have the Lakers against Philly, and then Anthony Davis versus Embiid, who wins the matchup. And just because Kevin mentioned it, over or under 200 points?
It's got to be over. I just think the amount of scoring talent on both teams is just kind of nuts.
Yeah.
Just for this 76er team, 6 or 7 players already averaged more than 12 points a game. So it's you're bound to probably going to get stat pad after stat pad from both sides. But I just think the key factor is just going to be bench at this point. As much as we like Anthony Davis, I think he's been very actually inconsistent in terms of what we were kind of expecting for coming off from a championship. And now you got to make an MVP run. We know what LeBron's going to be coasting. That's his thing. He'll show up in the playoffs and then get to the finals, winner. That's just the LeBron story at that point. But I just think when you have a Seth Curry, even Shake Milton, I know that's really weird to say, but I think Shake Milton somehow just knows his role. He's a guy who just needs to come in, drop 12, 15 points to just be a spark plug. He's a spark plug player at that point. Mm-hmm. Tyrese Maxey, Danny Green, they just have a solid bench overall, and everyone knows their role. That's the thing. The Lakers, very concerned with Montrezl Harrell. Is very not good. That's what I'm expecting. Dennis Schroeder's probably the one that's actually netting 0 with him and probably covering up some of the ground in terms of the 6-man race at that point. But for me, I'm going to go Philly. I think Philly's going to win by 10 at least. So.
I like that. Why don't we so you are saying Embiid over Anthony Davis?
Yeah, Embiid over
Okay.
Davis.
And then just to make it a little bit more interesting, because 200 is a very low line, over under 220.
I'll go over. It's just gonna be
All right.
Kevin, let's go. Come on.
All right,
Under.
John, it's your
Under.
turn. Why don't you hit us with what you got?
I actually like if the season ended today, and it's like kind of obvious because they're both LA's tied for the 1 seed, I think, but this would be like my ideal finals matchup. This is fascinating actually because you get that AD versus Embiid matchup, and you get Ben Simmons checking LeBron, probably the best person you can put on a LeBron James. Obviously, offensively, not going to be that useful in that series, but like defensively will be huge for them. And then you get Tobias Harris, who's having an awesome year for them too. This Philly team's fascinating. I'm glad we picked this matchup because I think it will be great. I would definitely go under 220.
Okay.
I think that I think Embiid will have the better of this matchup between him and AD. I'm very interested to see it though, but I think I would say Embiid. I think I'll actually, assuming that everyone's like healthy, I think I'll actually pick Philly just to spice it up a little. But I think it'll be close. My most interesting thing that I've learned about this Lakers team is that I saw the Ringer Zach Cram tweeted out a stat that I think this is actually the first team that LeBron has been on where the plus minus when he's sitting is still positive. Like this is actually the first time he's been on a team that can stay afloat when he's sitting on the bench. So that's just like this Lakers team is actually just really, really good. They're pretty much the most flawless team we have in the league right now. But I have a feeling that I guess I'm picking Philly because I just have a feeling they'll want it more. I don't know, like I think a regular season game in January will matter more to them than it will the Lakers.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I'm gonna have to agree with you on that front, John. I have Philly over the Lakers. I have Embiid over Anthony Davis, and I'm actually gonna go under as well for 220. Recently, the Lakers have been kind of hitting that under for that kind of line, so I would definitely agree. I don't exactly think it's going to be a high scoring game. Sam's a little bit higher on that one, so we'll see what happens. My thing is for this game is, will Seth Curry show up? Will he be shooting threes, or is he going to be cold? And then also it's just the bench, like that we're talking about, like the starters. We know the starters are going to be fire. We know they're going to be great. But it all depends on the bench. The Lakers have a well-rounded team, and as we have seen, the Sixers also have a pretty well-rounded team too. With a lot of their starters missing games, they've been pretty solid. I'll go with the Sixers over this one though. So,
and another just like quick interesting thing, I wonder actually if we'll see much AD versus Embiid, or if it'll be more like Marc Gasol versus Embiid, and then like Ben Simmons is guarding Anthony Davis, Tobias Harris on LeBron kind of thing. I'm interested to see what the matchups actually look like. Obviously, like, it's the modern NBA. They're switching all the time, so you never know. But I am kind of interesting to see what it looks like, just because AD does traditionally, like, he plays power forward. So I wonder if Joel will be like, no, give me that. Or like if he'll be like, I'll guard Marc Gasol so that I can focus on scoring.
I feel like Ben Simmons would be the one to be able to actually like kind of keep up with Anthony Davis. Like Anthony Davis is the bigger person, but like Ben Simmons has the stamina to do it.
Ben Simmons is he's really strong and fast and athletic, and like he's just a great defender. So if they want to put him there, he'll do his best. But AD is going to get he's AD. But
he'll get.
I'm interested to see what those matchups come out to be.
Yeah, same here. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. You guys can find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Then you could also watch us on YouTube, like, share, subscribe, watch our beautiful faces every week. Ding. And then also you can email us at the deep3podcast@gmail.com for any questions, anything that we could answer for you. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good night.
Go Knicks, go.